Gabriel Russo had walked into Elena's cafe every Thursday for 4 months expecting her smile, but when he pushed through that door at noon, he found his deadliest rival, Victor Castellanos, gripping his waitress by the jaw, forcing her to look at a photograph that made her legs buckle, while the entire lunch crowd sat frozen, pretending they couldn't hear her, begging him to stop. The image burned itself into Gabriel's memory with surgical precision. Elena's dark hair had come loose from its usual ponytail, strands falling across her terrified face. Her apron was twisted, her hands clawing uselessly at Victor's expensive sleeve. The photograph Victor held showed something that had turned her skin the color of ash. Every customer in Rosie's cafe had suddenly become fascinated with their coffee cups, their sandwiches, the pattern on the floor, anywhere but the violence unfolding 3 feet away. Gabriel's blood turned to ice water in his veins. He had arrived at the cafe 15 minutes earlier than usual, unable to concentrate on the contracts spread across his desk. All morning, he had been thinking about her laugh, the way she remembered that he took his coffee black with exactly half a sugar. Foolish thoughts for a man in his position, dangerous thoughts. But he had allowed himself this one weakness, this Thursday ritual that made him feel almost human. Now his weakness stood trembling in the grip of the one man in Chicago who wanted Gabriel Russo dead. Victor spotted him first. That cruel mouth curved into a smile that held no warmth, only the satisfaction of a predator who had found the perfect pressure point. He released Elena's jaw slowly, deliberately, letting his fingers drag across her cheek in a mockery of tenderness. Gabriel. Victor straightened his cuffs as if he had been doing nothing more offensive than ordering lunch. Funny running into you here? I had no idea this little establishment had such distinguished clientele. Elena stumbled backward the moment Victor released her, her hip colliding with the coffee station. Ceramic cups rattled. Her eyes darted between the two men, with the desperate confusion of someone who had just realized she was standing in the middle of a war she never knew existed. Gabriel forced his body to remain still. Every instinct screamed at him to cross the room, to put himself between Elena and the monster wearing Italian leather shoes. But Gabriel had built his empire on control, on patience, on never revealing his hand until the cards were already in his favor. Victor. Gabriel's voice emerged flat, disinterested, betraying nothing of the violence churning beneath his ribs. Long way from your territory. Territory? Victor chuckled, tucking the photograph into his jacket pocket. Elena's gaze followed it with naked desperation, and Gabriel filed that detail away for later. Such an old-fashioned concept. I prefer to think of Chicago as one big opportunity. Speaking of which, he turned back to Elena, who flinched so hard she nearly knocked over the coffee maker. I'll be back next week, sweetheart. Your father's debt does not disappear just because he did. Remember what I showed you. Remember what happens if you talk to anyone about our little arrangement. Victor walked toward the door, pausing deliberately when he drew level with Gabriel. Close enough that Gabriel could smell his cologne, could see the fresh scratch marks on his neck that Elena's fingernails must have left. She's pretty, Victor murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. I understand the appeal, but some things are bigger than pretty waitresses, Russo. Stay out of this one. Gabriel said nothing. He simply watched Victor push through the door and climb into the black sedan waiting at the curb. The engine purred to life. The car pulled away. The lunch crowd exhaled collectively and began gathering their things, suddenly remembering urgent appointments elsewhere. Within 3 minutes, the cafe had emptied completely. Only Gabriel remained. Elena stood behind the counter with her back pressed against the wall, both hands clamped over her mouth. Her whole body shook with tremors she could not control. The red marks on her jaw were already darkening toward purple, and when she lowered her hands, Gabriel saw matching bruises circling her left wrist. She had tried to pull away from him. She had fought. Something shifted in Gabriel's chest. Something that felt terrifyingly like his heart starting to beat again, after years of stillness. Elena. He spoke her name softly, the way one might approach a wounded animal. Are you hurt? She laughed, a broken sound that cracked in the middle. Am I hurt? I just your usual order. Let me get your usual order. Black coffee, half sugar. I remember. She turned toward the coffee machine, but her hands were shaking too violently to grip the pot. Gabriel watched her try 3 times before the ceramic mug slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. Elena stared at the broken pieces as if they had personally betrayed her. I am so sorry, she whispered, though Gabriel knew the apology had nothing to do with the mug. I am so sorry. I did not know he knew you. I did not know you were. I do not even know what you are. I do not know anything. I do not understand what is happening. Gabriel moved then, rounding the counter to stand beside her. She flinched when he reached past her for a towel, and that small movement of fear sliced through him like a blade. How long? His voice came out rougher than intended. How long has he been coming here? Elena's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. 3 weeks, every few days. He says my father owed his family something. He says the debt passes to me now that my father is gone. He showed me. Her voice broke. She touched her apron pocket where the photograph now rested, the one she had grabbed from Victor before he could take it with him. He showed me what he did to the last person who could not pay. Gabriel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Why did you not tell anyone? Call the police? The look Elena gave him contained 1,000 years of exhaustion. Who would believe me? And even if they did, men like him do not go to prison. Men like him make people disappear. She did not know how right she was. She did not know that she was looking at another man who made people disappear, who had built his kingdom on blood and silence and calculated brutality. She did not know that the quiet customer who tipped too generously and asked about her day commanded an army that could level Victor Castellanos and everything he loved. But she was about to learn. Gabriel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently pushed the loose strand of hair back from her face. Elena trembled but did not move. Her eyes searched his, looking for something she could trust. If Gabriel had known that his rival had been circling her for weeks, he would have burned Victor's world down before the first threat ever left his lips. But he had not known. He had been too careful, too controlled, too committed to keeping his distance from the waitress who made him feel things he had no right to feel. That ended today. That satisfying click of Victor's car door closing felt like a starting gun. What Gabriel did not know yet was how deep this debt ran or what he would become to protect her from it. If you are already hooked, that subscribe button is right there. And do not forget to comment the country you are watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. 4 months earlier, Gabriel Russo had stumbled into Rosie's Café with blood on his cuffs and murder still fresh in his memory. The meeting had gone wrong from the moment it started. 3 men who thought they could skim from Gabriel's operations, who believed their loyalty had earned them immunity from consequences. They had been wrong. Gabriel had handled the situation personally, the way his father had taught him, the way that ensured no one else would ever make the same mistake. But something about watching the life drain from familiar eyes had left him hollow in a way he could not name. He needed somewhere to disappear, somewhere no one would recognize him, where no one would ask questions about the crimson staining his sleeve. The café appeared on a corner he had never noticed before, tucked between a laundromat and a bookshop that looked like it had not sold a book in decades. A faded sign read Rosie's in peeling letters. Perfect. Gabriel slid into a booth near the back, positioning himself to watch both exits. Habit. Survival. The lunch rush had ended, leaving only a handful of customers scattered throughout the small space. He kept his stained cuff pressed against his thigh, hidden beneath the table. She appeared within 30 seconds. Dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, brown eyes that held warmth despite the exhaustion shadowing them, an apron spotted with coffee stains and what looked like flour. She set down a menu he had not asked for and a glass of water he had not ordered. Rough day? Her voice carried no judgment, no curiosity, no fear. She glanced at his face, not his hands, not the tension coiled in every muscle. The pie helps, trust me. Gabriel ordered coffee and the pie. She brought both without hovering, without making small talk, without trying to earn a larger tip through forced cheerfulness. She simply let him exist in her space, alone with whatever demons had driven him through her door. He left $40 for a $6 check and told himself he would never return. 2 days later, he was back. Over the following weeks, Gabriel constructed elaborate justifications for his Thursday visits. The coffee was better than it had any right to be. The location was convenient. The anonymity was useful. Each excuse crumbled under the slightest examination, but he kept building new ones because the alternative required admitting something far more dangerous. He was coming back for her. Her name was Elena Harper. She worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7 when another server called in sick. She was raising her teenage sister alone after their mother passed 2 years ago cancer, she mentioned once, with the practiced detachment of someone who had learned to discuss tragedy without drowning in it. She had dreamed of becoming a nurse but deferred her enrollment when the hospital bills started arriving. Now those dreams gathered dust alongside her mother's photographs in the small apartment above the café. Gabriel learned all of this in fragments, A sentence here while she refilled his cup. A story there when the cafe emptied, and she allowed herself to lean against the counter, just for a moment, before the next customer demanded her attention. She mentioned her father exactly once. "He passed when I was young," she said, wiping down the table beside Gabriel's booth. "Some kind of accident. My mother never talked about it." Something flickered across Gabriel's face: recognition, perhaps, or the shadow of knowledge he should not possess. Elena did not notice. She never noticed how carefully he watched her, how he memorized every detail she offered like a man dying of thirst collecting drops of rain. Rosie noticed. The elderly owner had sharp eyes that missed nothing, despite the gentle grandmother persona she wore like armor. She caught Gabriel watching Elena through the window one afternoon before he entered, and when he sat down, she delivered his coffee herself. "Some men come for coffee," Rosie said quietly, setting the cup before him. "Some come for salvation. I wonder which one you are." Gabriel offered no answer. Rosie expected none. His right-hand man confronted him after the third month. "You are getting attached," the older man warned, his weathered face tight with concern. "That is dangerous for someone like you, for someone like her." Gabriel dismissed him with a wave. It was coffee, nothing more. A brief escape from the weight of his empire, a chance to pretend he was someone capable of ordinary things like lunch at a neighborhood cafe. But he had already assigned 2 men to watch the block. He had already traced Elena's route home each night, ensuring no threats lurked in the shadows she walked through. He had already memorized the schedule of every regular customer, flagging anyone who looked at her too long or stood too close. He had been protecting her without her knowledge, wrapping invisible walls around her ordinary life. But he had not protected her from Victor, the rival he had been tracking for months, the enemy who had sworn vengeance against everything Gabriel held. Dear Victor had found the one weakness Gabriel had tried so desperately to hide. And now Elena Harper, the waitress with the tired eyes and the kind heart, stood directly in the crossfire of a war she never knew existed. Gabriel stayed until closing. He sat at the counter, nursing cups of coffee he did not drink, watching Elena move through her duties with mechanical precision. She wiped down tables that were already clean. She reorganized the sugar packets 3 times. She did everything possible to avoid meeting his eyes, as if looking at him might shatter the fragile composure she had reconstructed around herself like armor. The last customer left at 4. Rosie emerged from the kitchen, took one look at Gabriel's face, and retreated without a word. The old woman knew when to disappear. It was why she had survived this long in a neighborhood that had swallowed so many others. Elena finally stopped moving when the close sign flipped in the window. She stood behind the counter, both hands pressed flat against the surface, staring at the space between them. 3 weeks. Her voice emerged hoarse, scraped raw by hours of suppressed tears. "He has been coming for 3 weeks. Every few days, always during lunch rush when I could not make a scene. Always with that same smile, like we were old friends catching up." Gabriel's jaw tightened. What did he want? Money. At first, he said my father borrowed from his family years ago. $50,000. He said the interest had been accumulating since before I was born. Elena laughed bitterly. "I make $11 an hour plus tips." I told him I could not pay that in 3 lifetimes. What did he say? That there were other ways to settle debts. She finally looked at Gabriel, and the fear in her eyes made something violent twist in his chest. He started talking about my sister, mentioning her school, her schedule, the route she walks home. He knows everything about us. Gabriel forced his hands to remain flat on the counter, calm, controlled. The rage building inside him demanded release, demanded blood, but Elena needed steadiness right now. She needed someone who would not add to her terror. "Your father," Gabriel said carefully. "What did he do for work?" "He was a mechanic, just a mechanic." The words came too quickly, too defensively. "He had a shop on the south side before we moved. He fixed cars, that was all." But doubt flickered across her face as she spoke, old memories surfacing. Fragments of overheard conversations and unexplained absences that a child had been too young to question. Gabriel recognized the expression. He had worn it himself once, long ago, before he learned exactly what kind of man his own father had been. Elena. He spoke her name softly, an anchor in the storm of her thoughts. "I can help you." "Help me how?" She pulled back slightly, suspicion replacing vulnerability. "I do not even know who you are. You come in here twice a week, you tip like money means nothing to you, and you wear a watch that costs more than this entire building. Men like that do not just help waitresses with their problems." She was right to be suspicious. Gabriel had built his reputation on being exactly the kind of man no one should trust. But the rules that governed his world seemed to dissolve when he looked at her, replaced by something older and more primal. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small phone. Nothing fancy, a prepaid burner, untraceable, loaded with a single contact. He slid it across the counter toward her. "If Victor comes back, call this number, day or night, I will answer." Elena stared at the phone like it might bite her. "Why? Why do you care what happens to me?" "Because you smiled at me when I had blood on my hands. Because you offered me pie when I deserved punishment. Because you are the only good thing I have allowed myself to want in 15 years. Gabriel said none of this. Instead, he simply pushed the phone closer. "Take it." Her fingers brushed his when she finally accepted the device. The contact lasted less than a second, but Gabriel felt it burn through him like electricity. Elena's breath caught almost imperceptibly. She felt it too, that impossible current between two people who had no business standing this close to each other. She tucked the phone into her apron pocket without another word. Gabriel left the cafe as the afternoon sun painted the street in shades of gold, but he did not go far. He parked his car across the street, positioned where he could see both the cafe entrance and the narrow staircase leading to the apartment above. He watched Elena lock the front door, watched her climb those stairs with heavy steps, watched until a light flickered on in the second-floor window. Only then did he make the call. "I need everything on a man named Harper," Gabriel said when his right-hand man answered. "Mechanic, South Side, died about 15 years ago. Wife passed 2 years back. 2 daughters, 1 adult, 1 teenager. Find out what he was really doing and who he was doing it with." 20 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a text message. Gabriel read it 3 times, each word confirming the suspicion that had taken root the moment Victor Castellanos walked into Rosie's cafe. "You were right. The Harper girl is connected." 2 blocks away, Elena stood at her window clutching the phone Gabriel had given her. She watched his car idling under the streetlight, watched the faint glow of his face illuminated by his own phone screen. She should be afraid of him. Everything about his presence radiated power and danger, and the kind of authority that came from doing terrible things to terrible people. But for the first time since her mother died, she did not feel alone. Her sister appeared in the doorway, homework abandoned. "Who was that man at the cafe today? The scary one with the accent?" Elena turned sharply. "You saw him?" "A few weeks ago. He was standing outside when I walked home from school." Her sister shrugged. "I thought he was lost or something." The phone in Elena's hand suddenly felt heavier. Victor had been watching them long before he ever made his presence known. Elena had no idea that the phone in her hand represented more than protection, it was a claim. Gabriel Russo did not give warnings lightly, and Victor Castellanos did not make threats he failed to keep. If this story already has its hooks in you, hit that like button. What happens next? Even I was not prepared for it. The files arrived at Gabriel's estate before midnight. His right-hand man spread them across the mahogany desk in Gabriel's study, each document more damning than the last. Federal transcripts, witness protection records, surveillance photographs dated 15 years back, showing a man Gabriel had never met standing beside people he knew all too well. Elena's father had never been a mechanic. His real name was Martin Kozlov, and for 12 years he had served as the primary money launderer for the Castellanos crime family. Every dirty dollar that Victor's father earned from extortion, from trafficking, from enterprises too vile to name, had passed through Martin's hands before emerging clean on the other side. He had been brilliant at his work, indispensable, trusted, until the federal agents came knocking. Gabriel scanned the testimony transcripts, watching a dead man's words destroy an empire from beyond the grave. Martin Kozlov had cooperated fully. Names, dates, account numbers, offshore locations, he had surrendered everything in exchange for immunity and a new identity. The Castellanos operation collapsed within 18 months. Victor's father received 4 consecutive life sentences. He died of a heart attack in his cell 3 years later, alone and abandoned by the associates who had once feared him. Victor's mother followed 6 months after that. Pills, according to the coroner. The shame had consumed her. The family went into witness protection immediately after the trial, Gabriel's right-hand man explained, his voice heavy with the weight of what he had uncovered. New names, new city, new life. Martin Kozlov became David Harper. His wife and daughters never knew the truth. Gabriel stared at a photograph of Elena as a child, perhaps 6 years old, gap-toothed smile, completely unaware that her entire existence had been built on lies and blood money. The man holding her hand in the picture had doomed her before she could even read. How did Victor find them? The mother's death. Elena used her real social security number when filing the hospital paperwork, a clerical error, probably. Someone in Victor's network flagged it within weeks. The older man paused. He has been hunting this family for over a decade, Gabriel. The father died before Victor could reach him. The mother was already gone. That leaves only the daughters. The daughters. Elena and her teenage sister. The last surviving links to the man who had destroyed Victor Castellanos' entire world. Gabriel understood now why Victor had mentioned debt with such venom. The money was never the point. Victor wanted revenge, the kind that could only be satisfied by making Elena suffer the way he had suffered. By taking everything from her the way her father had taken everything from him. There is more. His right-hand man slid another folder across the desk. Victor has done this before. The folder contained photographs, crime scene images, newspaper clippings about accidents and disappearances that were never quite solved. Each victim shared a common thread: they had all testified against the Castellanos family or helped bring them down. A prosecutor's daughter, killed in a hit and run. An accountant's wife, vanished without a trace. A federal agent's son, found floating in Lake Michigan. Victor did not simply want Elena dead. He wanted her destroyed first, humiliated, broken. He wanted Gabriel to watch it happen, knowing he had failed to protect her. Walk away. The older man's voice carried genuine concern, the kind earned through 30 years of loyalty. This war will cost you everything. Victor has resources, connections, men who would die for the chance to hurt you. And for what? A waitress you barely know? Gabriel did not look up from the photographs. His fingers traced the edge of Elena's childhood picture, memorizing the curve of her innocent smile. She is not a waitress. Not anymore. Then what is she? Gabriel finally raised his eyes, and his right-hand man took an involuntary step backward. He had seen that expression before, cold, absolute, terrifying in its certainty. It was the look Gabriel wore when he had already made a decision that would reshape the world around him. She is mine. 2 miles away, Elena knelt on the floor of her mother's closet, surrounded by boxes she had never had the strength to open. Her sister slept in the next room, exhausted from worry and questions Elena could not answer. The apartment felt smaller tonight, the walls pressing inward like a trap slowly closing. She had been searching for anything that might explain Victor's accusations. Old bills, forgotten letters, some proof that her father had been the honest mechanic she remembered. Instead, she found a shoebox hidden beneath winter coats that had not been worn in years. Photographs spilled across her lap. Her father, younger than she had ever seen him, standing with men in expensive suits. Her father accepting an envelope thick with cash. Her father shaking hands with a man whose face Elena recognized instantly. Victor Castellanos, 20 years younger, but those cold eyes were unmistakable. Beneath the photographs lay documents that made no sense: bank statements from accounts she had never heard of, property deeds for buildings in cities she had never visited. And at the very bottom, a single folded paper that stopped her heart. A birth certificate, her birth certificate. But the name printed on it was not Elena Harper. The name was Elena Kozlov. Her entire childhood collapsed around her like a house built on sand. Everything she believed about her family, her father, her own identity, all of it, had been a carefully constructed fiction designed to hide sins she had never committed. Her phone buzzed. The burner phone Gabriel had given her, sitting forgotten in her pocket. She pulled it out with trembling hands and read the message glowing on the screen. Pack a bag for you and your sister. I am sending a car. Do not argue. Do not wait until morning. Victor's men are watching your building right now. Elena moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. A black sedan sat parked across the street, engine off, 2 figures visible in the front seats. They were not even trying to hide. Her phone buzzed again. Trust me. Come to me. I will explain everything. Elena stared at the message, caught between 2 impossible choices. Stay and face Victor's revenge for crimes her father committed. Or flee into the arms of a man whose world she did not understand, whose power terrified her, whose eyes promised protection she desperately wanted to believe in. The black SUV arrived at Elena's apartment building before noon the next day. Gabriel stepped out into the harsh midday sun, his eyes scanning the street for threats before he moved toward the entrance. 2 of his men remained with the vehicle. 2 more had already secured the stairwell. Victor's surveillance team had vanished sometime before dawn, a tactical retreat that made Gabriel more nervous than their presence had. Elena answered her door on the second knock, dark circles carved beneath her eyes. She had not slept. The birth certificate lay open on the kitchen table behind her, a silent accusation against everything she had believed about herself. "You need to leave," Gabriel said without preamble. "Now, both of you. I have a shift in 2 hours." Her voice emerged flat, hollowed out by a night spent drowning in revelations. "Rosie is counting on me. I cannot just disappear. Rosie will understand. Rosie does not know that my entire life has been a lie." Elena's composure cracked, grief and rage bleeding through the fractures. "She does not know that my father destroyed a crime family and painted a target on his daughters. She does not know that Elena Harper does not actually exist." Gabriel stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The apartment felt suffocating, too small, too exposed, too easy for Victor's men to breach. Every window represented a vulnerability. Every thin wall offered inadequate protection. "Victor Castellanos is not collecting a debt," Gabriel said quietly. "He is hunting you. Your father testified against his family 15 years ago. Victor's father died in prison because of that testimony. His mother killed herself from the shame. Victor has spent the last decade destroying everyone connected to your father's betrayal." Elena sank onto the edge of her couch, legs failing her. "I was 11. I did not know. I did not know any of it. Victor does not care about innocence. He cares about suffering. He wants you to lose everything, your job, your home, your dignity. He wants to break you slowly before he finishes what your father started." A door creaked open behind them. Elena's sister stood in the hallway, still wearing pajamas, fear etched across her young face. She had heard everything. "Elena?" Her voice trembled. "What is happening? Who is this man?" Elena looked at her sister, 15 years old, already robbed of her mother, now learning that even her name belonged to a stranger. The weight of protection settled across Elena's shoulders like a physical burden. She had raised this girl, fed her, helped her with homework, held her through nightmares about their mother's death. She would not let Victor Castellanos touch her. "Pack a bag," Elena said, her voice steadying with sudden resolve. "Only what you need. We are leaving." Gabriel's estate sprawled across 12 acres of manicured grounds 40 minutes outside the city. The SUV passed through 3 separate security checkpoints before reaching the main house, a stone mansion that looked like it belonged in another century, surrounded by gardens and trees that masked the armed patrols walking the perimeter. Elena pressed her face to the window as they approached, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of wealth on display. Fountains, sculptures, a garage large enough to hold a dozen vehicles. This was not simply a home. This was a fortress disguised as luxury. Armed men nodded respectfully as Gabriel emerged from the SUV. They did not question the 2 women accompanying him. They did not need to. "Who are you?" Elena finally asked, standing in the circular driveway with her single duffel bag clutched against her chest. "Really, who are you?" Gabriel turned to face her, sunlight catching the sharp planes of his face. He could have lied, could have softened the truth into something more palatable. But Elena deserved honesty, even if it terrified her. "I am the kind of man your father was running from, and the only man who can protect you from Victor Castellanos." Elena should have fled. Every rational instinct screamed warnings about dangerous men in gilded cages and the price of protection offered by wolves. But Gabriel's hand was gentle when he guided her toward the entrance. His touch carried no threat, no demand, no expectation. He guided her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. The interior of the mansion stole what remained of Elena's breath. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, artwork that probably cost more than she would earn in a lifetime. A woman in her 60s appeared from a side hallway, the housekeeper. Elena assumed, and her eyes widened almost imperceptibly when she saw the guests. "He has never brought anyone here before," the woman whispered to a younger maid, not realizing Elena could hear. "Not once in 12 years. Gabriel led them through corridors lined with portraits and photographs. Elena noticed one painting in his study as they passed a woman with dark hair and familiar eyes, captured in oil and gilt frame. The resemblance to Elena herself was startling enough to make her stumble. Gabriel noticed her pause but offered no explanation. "That room stays locked," he said simply. "Everything else is open to you." He stopped at a door near the end of the residential wing and pushed it open to reveal a bedroom bathed in afternoon light. Windows overlooked a garden bursting with late summer flowers. Bookshelves lined one wall, already stocked with titles appropriate for a teenage girl. The bed was made with soft linens in calming colors. "For your sister," Gabriel said. "She will be safe here. Private tutors can continue her education until this situation is resolved. She will want for nothing." Elena's sister rushed past them, drawn to the window and the garden beyond. For a moment, she looked like a normal teenager again, curious, hopeful, temporarily freed from the terror that had consumed the last 24 hours. Elena watched her sister explore the room, touching the books, bouncing slightly on the mattress, and something inside her shattered completely. Tears she had been suppressing for hours, days, years, finally broke free. She pressed both hands over her mouth to muffle the sobs, but her whole body shook with the force of releasing grief she had carried alone for so long. Gabriel stood beside her, uncertain for the first time since she had known him. He had bought women jewelry, cars, penthouse apartments with views of the city skyline. He had never wanted to give someone safety before, had never understood that protection could matter more than diamonds or designer clothes. "Thank you." Elena's voice broke around the words. "I do not know how to repay this." Gabriel's hand found her shoulder, steadying her without demanding anything in return. "You do not need to repay anything. You just need to stay alive." His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Gabriel read it once, twice, his expression hardening into something cold and murderous. "You cannot hide her forever, Russo." 3 days inside Gabriel's estate transformed Elena in ways she could not name. The terror that had gripped her since Victor's first visit began loosening its hold, replaced by something quieter and far more dangerous. She found herself watching Gabriel across rooms, studying the way he moved through his world with absolute authority. He commanded armies with a glance. He controlled empires with a word. Yet around her, he softened, pulling out chairs, asking about her comfort, ensuring her sister had everything she needed. He kept his distance, gave her space to process the destruction of everything she had believed about her life. But Elena caught him watching her too, standing at windows when she walked through the gardens, pausing in doorways when she laughed at something his housekeeper said. His eyes followed her like she was a prayer he had not yet learned how to speak. On the third afternoon, Elena went looking for him. She found Gabriel in his study, surrounded by documents and photographs spread across his massive desk. The curtains were drawn against the afternoon sun, casting the room in shadows that suited the darkness of his work. He did not hear her approach, or perhaps he did, and simply chose not to acknowledge her presence until she stood close enough to see what he was reviewing. Photographs of herself, dozens of them. Elena at the café, wiping down tables. Elena walking home in the rain. Elena helping her sister with homework through the window of their apartment. The timestamp stretched back weeks before Victor ever approached her. "You have been protecting me this whole time." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Before Victor even showed his face. "You were already watching." Gabriel did not deny it. He set down the surveillance report he had been reading and turned to face her fully. The weight of confession settled across his features. "The first day I walked into that cafe, I knew you were too good for my world. Too kind. Too genuine. Everything about you represented things I had surrendered long ago." He exhaled slowly. "I told myself I would stay away. I told myself that wanting you was selfish, that bringing you into my life would only destroy the light you carried." Elena stepped closer, drawn forward by a gravity she could not resist. "What changed?" "Victor put his hands on you." Gabriel's voice dropped to something raw and primal. "You became mine the moment I saw his fingerprints on your skin. Every rule I had made for myself shattered when I watched you trembling behind that counter. I knew then that I would kill anyone who ever touched you again." The air between them crackled with tension that had been building since the first cup of coffee she ever poured him. Elena understood she stood at a precipice. One step backward and she could retreat to safety, to the boundaries that protected people from men like Gabriel Russo. One step forward and she would fall into a world from which there would be no return. She stepped forward. Gabriel's control broke the moment she reached for him. His hands found her waist, pulling her against his chest with a desperation that stole her breath. His mouth descended on hers, consuming, possessive, reverent all at once. He kissed her like she was oxygen and he had been drowning for years. Elena responded with everything she had been holding back. The loneliness of raising her sister alone. The fear of Victor's threats. The desperate, aching need to be held by someone strong enough to keep the darkness away. She poured all of it into the kiss, surrendering herself to a man she barely knew but somehow trusted completely. Gabriel pulled back before the moment could consume them entirely. His forehead pressed against hers, both of them breathing hard, his hands trembling where they gripped her hips. "I will not take more than you are ready to give." The words cost him. She could see the restraint carved into every line of his face. "You have been through too much. I will not add to your pain." Elena cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "What if I am ready to give everything?" Something shifted in Gabriel's expression. The careful control he wore like armor fell away, revealing the raw hunger he had been suppressing since the day he first saw her smile. He searched her face for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that she did not understand exactly what she was offering. He found only certainty. Gabriel lifted her as if she weighed nothing, her legs wrapping instinctively around his waist. He carried her through the study, down the corridor, into a bedroom she had never entered, his bedroom. Afternoon light filtered through gauze curtains, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. He laid her on sheets that smelled like him and worshipped her with hands that had ended lives but touched her like she was sacred. Elena gave herself to him completely, body, heart, trust. Every wall she had built crumbled beneath his patient devastation. Every fear dissolved in the heat of his claiming. When it was over, they lay tangled together in the fading afternoon light. Elena's head rested on Gabriel's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, and for the first time in years, she felt completely at peace. "What happens when Victor comes for me?" The question she had been avoiding finally found its voice. "He will not stop. You know that." Gabriel's arm tightened around her. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a vow written in blood. "He will not touch you. He will not touch your sister. I will burn everything he has built before I let him breathe the same air as you. Every man who works for him, every building he owns, every memory of his name. I will erase Victor Castellanos from existence if that is what it takes to keep you safe." Elena should have been frightened by the violence in his promise. She should have recoiled from the casual way he spoke of destruction and death. Instead, she pressed closer to him, drawing comfort from the very darkness that should have terrified her. She had fallen in love with a monster, but he was her monster now. Elena drifted to sleep, wrapped in Gabriel's arms, exhaustion finally claiming her after days of fear and upheaval. She did not hear his phone vibrate on the nightstand, did not see his expression harden as he read the message, did not notice him slip from the bed to make a call in the hallway. "Victor hit one of our warehouses," his right-hand man reported, "burned it to the ground. He left a message carved into the security guard who survived." "What message?" "She is next." Gabriel ended the call and stood in the darkness of the hallway, staring at the door behind which Elena slept peacefully. The news would play the warehouse fire as suspected organized crime. They would never connect it to a waitress hiding in a mansion outside the city. He returned to the bedroom and slid back into bed beside her. Elena stirred, curling against him instinctively, seeking his warmth even in sleep. "I will destroy myself before I let anyone hurt you," Gabriel whispered against her hair. "I promise you that." She had walked into his world not knowing she would never leave. But Elena was about to learn that loving a dangerous man came with a price one Victor was determined to collect. If this story has wrapped around your heart, help it reach others with a like. Because what happens next, that is when everything changes. 1 week in Gabriel's world had taught Elena what it meant to be cherished. She woke each morning wrapped in his arms, spent her days exploring the estate grounds, and fell asleep each night to the sound of his heartbeat beneath her ear. Her sister had adjusted remarkably well befriending the housekeeper's teenage son, throwing herself into the private tutoring Gabriel had arranged, slowly releasing the trauma of their sudden upheaval. For 7 days, Elena allowed herself to believe they might actually survive this. Gabriel shattered that illusion on the 8th morning. "I have to go into the city." He stood at the bedroom door, already dressed in one of his immaculate suits, tension carved into every line of his body. Business that cannot wait. "I will be back before dinner." Elena crossed the room to straighten his tie, a gesture that had become ritual between them. "We will be fine. Your men are everywhere. What could possibly happen?" Gabriel cupped her face in his hands, studying her features as if memorizing them. When he kissed her, it carried a desperation that made her stomach tighten with sudden unease. "Stay inside the main house," he instructed. "Do not go beyond the gardens. Keep your phone with you at all times." "Gabriel," she laughed softly, trying to ease his worry. "I promise. We will be perfectly safe." He left reluctantly, glancing back 3 times before his car disappeared through the main gates. Elena watched until the vehicle vanished from sight, then went to find her sister for lunch. The afternoon sun blazed overhead as Elena and her sister walked through the rear gardens, admiring the roses that the groundskeeper had spent decades cultivating. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter at regular intervals. Security cameras tracked every movement. The estate felt impenetrable, a fortress where nothing could touch them. The power cut without warning at 2:30. Every light in the mansion went dark. The security cameras stopped their mechanical rotation. The electric fence surrounding the property fell silent. Elena's phone showed no signal jammed. She realized with growing horror. "Elena?" Her sister's voice trembled. "What is happening?" Guards emerged from their posts, weapons drawn, communicating through hand signals when their radios produced only static. Elena grabbed her sister's arm and pulled her toward the house, instinct screaming that something had gone terribly wrong. They never reached the door. The guards fell silently, one by one. Elena did not hear gunshots, only the soft thuds of bodies hitting grass. Professional, coordinated, the work of men who had trained for exactly this kind of infiltration. Victor Castellanos emerged from behind a sculpted hedge with 3 armed men flanking him. His smile held no warmth, only the satisfaction of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. "Hello, Elena." He pronounced her name like a curse. "Did you really think Gabriel's walls could keep me out?" Elena shoved her sister behind her, positioning her own body as a shield. "How did you get past security?" "Amazing what money can buy." Victor gestured casually toward the fallen guards. "Loyalty is such a fragile thing." One of Gabriel's most trusted men proved quite willing to share patrol schedules and security codes. For the right price. A betrayer. Someone close enough to know the estate's vulnerabilities. Elena's mind raced through possibilities, but Victor gave her no time to process. His men moved faster than she could react. Rough hands seized her sister, dragging the screaming teenager away from Elena's desperate grip. Victor himself caught Elena's wrists when she lunged forward, twisting them behind her back with practiced cruelty. "Your father took everything from me." Victor's breath was hot against her ear. "My father, my mother, my future. He destroyed my entire family, and then hid like a coward while I spent 15 years hunting for his children. Please." Elena hated how her voice broke. "She is just a child. She has nothing to do with this. Take me instead. Do whatever you want to me, but let her go." Victor laughed, a cold, empty sound that held no humanity. "I am not going to kill you, Elena. That would be far too quick." He forced her to watch as one of his men pressed a gun against her sister's temple. "I am going to make you watch while I destroy everything you love. Then I am going to give you to my men for their entertainment. And when Gabriel finally finds what remains of you, he will know that he failed. That all his power and money could not save the woman he loves." Something shifted inside Elena. The terror that had paralyzed her transformed into something harder, colder, the same steel that must have lived in her father when he chose to testify against monsters. She stopped struggling. Let Victor believe she had surrendered. Then she threw her head backward with every ounce of strength she possessed. Her skull connected with Victor's nose. Cartilage crunched. Blood sprayed across her hair. His grip loosened just enough for Elena to spin, her fingernails raking across his face, tearing furrows into his cheek. Victor screamed. His men hesitated, startled by the sudden violence from a woman they had dismissed as helpless. That hesitation saved her sister's life. The teenager bit down on the hand, covering her mouth, and ran. Elena saw her disappear around the corner of the mansion, heard her screaming for help, prayed that anyone would hear. Victor backhanded Elena so hard her vision exploded into stars. She hit the ground, tasting blood, ears ringing, barely conscious. Then she heard it. The roar of an engine, the screech of tires, the unmistakable sound of Gabriel's voice shouting her name. He came through the garden gate like a force of nature, blood already coating his knuckles and staining his ruined suit. He had fought his way through whatever ambush Victor had arranged. He had come for her. But Victor was faster. The knife appeared from nowhere, its blade pressing against Elena's throat before Gabriel could close the distance between them. Victor hauled her upright, using her body as a shield, backing toward a black van waiting beyond the garden wall. Gabriel stopped. The most powerful man in Chicago stood frozen, helpless, watching another man hold a knife to the woman he loved. "Let her go." Gabriel's voice cracked with desperation Elena had never heard before. "You want revenge? Take it on me. I am right here. She is innocent in this." Victor's smile dripped with venom. "Innocent? She is the daughter of the man who murdered my family. There is no innocent in this war, Russo. There never was." He dragged Elena another step backward. Gabriel matched it, hands raised, pleading with a man who had no mercy left to give. "Follow me," Victor warned, "and I will send her back in pieces." The van door slid open. Elena met Gabriel's eyes one last time, saw the agony there, the love, the fury that had no outlet. She tried to memorize his face, tried to hold on to the image of the man who had given her 7 perfect days. Then Victor threw her into the darkness, and the door slammed shut. Gabriel did not follow the van. He stood in the blood-soaked garden, watching the vehicle disappear through a gap in the perimeter fence, every instinct screaming at him to give chase. But 15 years of surviving in his world had taught him that desperation made men stupid. Victor wanted him to follow blindly into an ambush. Victor wanted him dead before he could ever reach Elena. So Gabriel did something far more dangerous, he thought. Victor had 3 properties in the city. The warehouse district compound was too obvious the first place anyone would look. The downtown office held no cells, no soundproofing, nowhere to conduct the kind of torture Victor had promised. That left the industrial complex on the south side, abandoned manufacturing plant. Multiple exits, defensible position. Victor would take her there. Gabriel's phone materialized in his hand. His fingers moved across the screen with mechanical precision, sending messages to every ally he had cultivated over 2 decades of building his empire. Favors were called in, debts were collected. Men who had sworn loyalty to Gabriel Russo received identical instructions. Southside Industrial Complex, full tactical assault, no survivors except the woman. By late afternoon, Gabriel had assembled an army. 47 men surrounded Victor's compound as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. They moved through shadows, eliminated exterior guards, cut communication lines. Victor's fortress became his tomb without him ever realizing the walls were closing in. Inside the complex, Elena sat bound to a metal chair in what had once been a foreman's office. Zip ties bit into her wrists. Blood from Victor's earlier blow had dried on her chin. Her shoulders ached from hours in the same position, but she refused to cry. Victor paced before her, gesturing with a whiskey glass, monologuing about grievances she had heard 3 times already. His father's arrest, his mother's suicide, the empire that crumbled because one accountant decided to grow a conscience. 15 years. Victor stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell the alcohol on his breath. 15 years I spent hunting your family. Your father died before I could reach him. Your mother wasted away from cancer before I could make her suffer. That left only you and your sister. Elena met his eyes without flinching. My father made a choice to do the right thing. He saw what your family did, the trafficking, the murders, the lives destroyed, and he chose to stop it. Your father made choices too. Do not blame me for his sins. The backhand came faster than she could track. Her head snapped sideways. Fresh blood filled her mouth. But when she turned back to face Victor, she smiled. Gabriel is coming. The words emerged steady, certain, carrying a faith she felt in her bones. And he will destroy you. Victor laughed, genuinely amused. Gabriel Russo? He is a businessman pretending to be a monster. He sits in boardrooms and signs contracts and thinks that makes him powerful. Victor leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper. I am the real thing. Elena, I have killed with my own hands. I have watched the light leave men's eyes and felt nothing but satisfaction. Gabriel does not have the stomach for what I am about to do to you. The explosion answered him. The western wall of the complex erupted inward, showering the room with concrete dust and twisted metal. Gunfire erupted from every direction, north, south, east. Gabriel's men breached through doors and windows simultaneously, overwhelming Victor's guards with brutal efficiency. Victor spun toward the chaos, reaching for the weapon at his hip, but he was too slow. The office door crashed open, and Gabriel Russo stepped through. He did not look like a businessman anymore. Blood covered his hands, his shirt, his face. His suit jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled to the elbows, his expression carved from something cold and ancient and merciless. He stepped over the body of a guard without glancing down, his eyes scanning the room until they found Elena. Relief flickered across his features. Then his gaze shifted to Victor, and the relief transformed into something that made Elena's breath catch. She had never seen hatred so pure. You should not have touched her. Gabriel's voice carried no emotion, no heat, just the flat certainty of a man pronouncing a death sentence. Victor raised his gun. Gabriel moved faster. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. Gabriel fought like he had been born for violence, surgical, efficient, merciless. He disarmed Victor with a twist that shattered his wrist, drove him to his knees with a blow to the temple, stood over his broken enemy with the gun now reversed in his own grip. Victor looked up through blood-matted hair, his arrogance finally cracking. "Wait. We can negotiate. I have money. I have connections. I can give you. You put your hands on what is mine." Gabriel pulled the trigger. The sound echoed through the empty complex, final and absolute. Victor Castellanos crumpled to the concrete floor, and 15 years of hunting ended in a single heartbeat. Elena watched the execution from her chair. She should have been horrified. She should have screamed, or looked away, or felt some revulsion at witnessing a man's death. Instead, she felt something unexpected flooding through her chest. Freedom. Gabriel crossed the room in 3 strides, producing a knife to cut her bonds. The zip ties fell away, and Elena collapsed into his arms, burying her face against his blood-stained chest. "It is over." His voice cracked as he held her, his composure finally breaking. "You are safe. You are mine. No one will ever touch you again." Elena pulled back just far enough to meet his eyes. "I watched you kill him." Gabriel's expression flickered with something like fear. Fear that she would reject him now that she had seen his true nature. "And I am glad." Elena cupped his face in her trembling hands. "I am glad you killed him. I am glad he is dead. Does that make me a monster too?" Gabrielle kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "That makes you the only woman who could ever be mine." His men began filtering into the room, reporting the compound secured, all hostiles neutralized. Among the bodies, Elena spotted one wearing a familiar uniform, Gabriel's own security detail. The traitor who had sold them out. Gabriel's justice had been swift. Sirens wailed in the distance. Gabriel's soldiers melted into the shadows, disappearing as efficiently as they had arrived. By the time authorities reached the scene, they would find only bodies and blood and questions that would never be answered. Gabriel lifted Elena into his arms and carried her toward the exit. "Let us go home." Home. The word had never sounded so beautiful. 3 days of healing passed before Elena truly believed she was safe. She woke in Gabriel's bed with morning sunlight warming her face, the silk sheets soft against skin that was finally beginning to heal. The bruises on her wrists had faded from purple to yellow. The cut on her lip had closed. The terror that had lived in her chest since Victor first appeared at the café had finally, mercifully, released its grip. Gabriel lay beside her, already awake, watching her with an expression she had come to recognize as wonder. He had barely left her side since carrying her out of that warehouse. He held her through nightmares, brought her meals she barely touched, sat in silence when words felt too heavy to speak. "Good morning." His voice was rough with sleep but gentle with something deeper. "Good morning." Elena stretched, wincing slightly at muscles still sore from her ordeal. "How long have you been watching me?" "Long enough to memorize the way the light catches your hair." He reached out to brush a strand from her face. "I started loving you the first time you smiled at me. Did you know that? You handed me coffee and told me the pie helps, and I felt something I had not felt in 20 years. Elena's heart clenched at the raw honesty in his confession. This man, this powerful, dangerous, terrifying man, had been undone by a waitress with tired eyes and flour on her apron. From somewhere in the house, laughter echoed. Elena's sister, playing some game with the housekeeper's son, already recovering with the resilience that only the young possessed. The sound washed over Elena like absolution. Gabriel sat up, his expression growing serious. "We need to talk about what happens next." Elena felt her stomach tighten. She had been avoiding this conversation, afraid of what it might reveal. "I can set you up anywhere," Gabriel continued, not meeting her eyes. "New city, new name, new life. I have resources to ensure you and your sister never want for anything. You could walk away from this world and never look back." He paused, his jaw tightening. "You would never have to see me again." The offer hung between them: freedom, safety, normalcy. Everything Elena had lost when Victor Castellanos walked into her café. Gabriel was giving her an exit, a chance to return to the ordinary life she had been living before a man with an expensive watch started ordering coffee twice a week. Elena rose from the bed without speaking. She crossed the room to Gabriel's closet, a space larger than her entire apartment had been, and pulled open the doors. His suits hung in perfect rows, organized by color, pressed and immaculate. She retrieved the small bag of belongings she had brought from her old life: 3 dresses, a worn cardigan, a photograph of her mother. She hung each dress carefully among Gabriel's suits, claiming space in his world as deliberately as he had claimed space in her heart. "I am not going anywhere." Gabriel appeared behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders, his reflection visible in the mirror beside hers. The relief that flooded his features cracked through the controlled exterior he wore like armor. "This life is not easy, Elena. People will always try to use you against me. There will be threats, violence, enemies who see kindness as weakness." Elena turned to face him, her hands pressing flat against his chest. "Then teach me how to survive it. Teach me your world. I did not come this far to run away now." Gabriel pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I do not deserve you." "Probably not." She smiled, the first genuine smile she had managed in days. "But I am keeping you anyway." They spent the afternoon planning a future Elena had never imagined possible. She would finish her nursing degree. Gabriel had already arranged enrollment at one of the best programs in the state. Her sister would attend the finest schools, have every opportunity their mother had dreamed of providing. Gabriel would continue legitimizing his business holdings, building something that could one day exist entirely in the light. When Elena's phone rang late in the afternoon, she almost did not recognize Rosie's number. "Sweetheart." The old woman's voice crackled with emotion. "I do not know how to thank you. The lawyer says the cafe is mine now. Free and clear, with enough money to keep it running for years. Some anonymous donor. But I know it was you, or that man of yours." Elena looked at Gabriel, who suddenly seemed very interested in a document on his desk. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You deserve it, Rosie. You gave me a chance when no one else would." After the call ended, Elena explored Gabriel's study while he took a business meeting. In the bottom drawer of his desk, she found 2 items that stopped her heart. The first was a receipt for a donation to the cancer wing of her mother's hospital. Gabriel had been funding it anonymously for over a year. The second was a small velvet box. Elena did not open it. Some discoveries were meant to be made together. 6 months later, Elena stood behind the counter of Rosie's Café watching the lunch rush with new eyes. The cafe looked the same as it always had: mismatched chairs, faded menu boards, the ancient coffee machine that wheezed and groaned but somehow produced the best brew in the neighborhood. The regulars occupied their usual spots, ordering the same meals they had ordered for years. Nothing about the physical space had changed, but everything else had transformed completely. Elena no longer wore a stained apron and tired smile. She wore a simple gold band on her left hand, accompanied by a diamond that caught the afternoon light whenever she moved. The cafe belonged to her now, a gift from an anonymous donor that everyone knew came from the quiet man who still visited every Tuesday and Thursday. Her sister worked the counter on weekends, earning money for the college fund that had grown substantially since their lives intersected with Gabriel Russo. The teenager laughed easily now, flirting harmlessly with customers, dancing to music only she could hear through her earbuds. The trauma of Victor Castellanos had faded into a memory that no longer haunted her dreams. The bell above the door chimed at exactly noon. Gabriel entered the cafe the same way he had that first day, surveying the room, cataloging exits, assessing threats that no longer existed. Old habits died hard for men in his profession, but his expression softened the moment his eyes found Elena, and the transformation still made her heart stumble after all these months. He crossed to the corner booth they had claimed as their own and slid into the worn leather seat. Elena grabbed 2 cups of coffee and joined him, settling into the space beside him rather than across. His arm wrapped around her shoulders immediately, pulling her close. "You are staring at me again." Elena smiled against the rim of her cup. "I am remembering." Gabriel's voice carried that gravelly warmth she had come to crave. "The first day I walked through that door, I was covered in blood and looking for somewhere to disappear. Instead, I found you. Best wrong turn you ever made? The only good decision in a lifetime of questionable ones." The cafe hummed with ordinary activity around them. Customers chatted about weather and sports and the rising cost of everything. Forks clinked against plates. The coffee machine hissed and sputtered. None of them knew that the well-dressed man in the corner booth controlled half the city's underworld. None of them needed to know. What they saw was simpler and more profound. They saw a man who looked at his wife like she hung the moon. They saw a woman who leaned into her husband's embrace without fear or hesitation. They saw love improbable, undeniable, fierce enough to survive everything that had tried to destroy it. Elena caught Gabriel watching her again as she rose to refill a regular's cup. "What are you thinking?" He waited until she returned to answer, pulling her back down beside him with gentle insistence. I am thinking that the most dangerous man in Chicago is completely at the mercy of a woman who serves coffee for fun." Elena laughed, that full, genuine sound that Gabriel had fallen in love with before he even knew her name. The laugh that had cracked something open inside him the first time he heard it, making him return to this unremarkable cafe again and again until she became the center of his entire world. "And do not you forget it." She pressed a kiss to his jaw, not caring who watched. "I expect that mercy to continue indefinitely. Whatever you want, always." The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Elena leaned her head against Gabriel's shoulder, watching her sister charm customers and wipe down tables and live the ordinary life that had nearly been stolen from them both. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, a debt she never owed, a father whose secrets had nearly killed her, a monster who had wanted to destroy everything she loved, and a man dangerous, powerful, capable of terrible things who had seen her when she felt invisible and chosen her when she had nothing to offer but a tired smile and a recommendation for pie. She had walked into his world not knowing she would never leave, but she had not lost herself in the transition. She had found herself in his protection, in his love, in the life they had built together from the ashes of everything Victor Castellanos had tried to burn. Gabriel's hand found hers beneath the table, his thumb tracing patterns across her knuckles. The ring he had given her 3 months ago caught the light, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the tabletop. "Happy?" he asked quietly. Elena considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, she had been drowning in bills and exhaustion, raising her sister alone, watching her dreams of nursing school slip further away with each passing year. She had been invisible to the world, just another struggling waitress in a city full of people barely surviving. Now she had security, purpose, a sister thriving in ways she had never imagined possible, a husband who would burn the world down to keep her safe, and a cafe full of regulars who waved when she walked in, who asked about her day, who saw her as someone worth knowing. "Yes," the word came out thick with emotion. "I am happy." She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude, not for the wealth or the safety or the power that came with being Gabriel Russo's wife. She prayed for something simpler and infinitely more precious. She prayed her thanks for being seen, for being chosen, for being loved exactly as she was, by a man who had no business loving anyone but had loved her anyway. Gabriel squeezed her hand, and Elena knew without asking that he understood. Perhaps he was even saying his own prayer, the kind that men like him did not believe themselves capable of speaking. Outside, the afternoon sun continued its slow descent toward evening. Inside Rosie's cafe, a waitress and a wolf sat together in a corner booth, holding hands, drinking coffee, building a life from the ruins of everything that had tried to tear them apart. And for the first time in either of their lives, neither of them was alone. That is how a struggling waitress became the wife of the city's most dangerous man, not through luck, through survival. Through choosing each other when walking away would have been easier. If this story moved you, I would be grateful to hear your thoughts in the comments. I would really appreciate it if you could share your thoughts about my videos. Your feedback helps me improve and create even better content for you. Thank you for being here.